Why is my mama's picture hanging in your clubhouse? The voice cut through the rumble of Harleys and the thick cloud of cigarette smoke like a knife through butter. Every single member of the Hells Angels Oakland chapter froze mid-motion. Beer bottles stopped halfway to mouths. Pool cues hung suspended in the air. The jukebox seemed to lower its volume out of pure shock. Standing in the doorway of the clubhouse, a place no outsider had ever walked into uninvited and lived to tell about it, was an 8-year-old black girl. No shoes on her dusty feet, no parent holding her hand, just a torn backpack hanging off one thin shoulder and eyes that didn't know how to be afraid. Marcus Ghost Dawson rose slowly from his seat at the head of the table, his 6'4" frame casting a shadow across the entire room. 52 years old, president of the Hells Angels Oakland chapter for the past 20 years, with a scar running from his left eye to his jawline. A man who'd done 20 months in Folsom for aggravated assault. A man whose name made grown men cross the street. "Who the hell let a kid in here?" Ghost's voice came out like gravel being crushed under a tire. But the little girl didn't answer his question. She just lifted her chin, looked past the leather vests and the tattooed arms and the weapons sitting on tables, and stared at the enormous photograph on the wall behind the bar. A black woman with caramel skin and amber eyes, her smile captured in a moment of pure joy, her natural hair wild and beautiful around her face like a crown. The girl's voice trembled, but her words hit harder than any bullet Ghost had ever taken. "Sir, why is my mama's picture in your clubhouse? My mama's been missing for 3 weeks, and nobody will tell me where she went." Ghost felt his knees threaten to buckle. The cigar fell from his fingers, landing on the concrete floor with a soft hiss, because he recognized something in that little girl's face that made his heart stop cold. She had his eyes. Dark brown, almost black, with that same intensity that made people look away. The same high cheekbones he saw in the mirror every morning. The same small scar on her chin. The exact same spot where he'd fallen off a bike when he was 5 years old and split his face open on the asphalt. "Jesus Christ," whispered Preach, Ghost's VP and best friend of 30 years, the only man in the room who knew the whole truth about the woman in the photograph. The woman Ghost thought had died 487 days ago. The woman he'd loved more than his own life. The woman who'd disappeared without a trace, leaving behind nothing but that photograph and a hole in Ghost's chest that never stopped bleeding. And now her daughter, their daughter, was standing in his clubhouse, asking questions that would tear down everything Ghost thought he knew about the last 8 years of his life. What happened next would change the Hells Angels Oakland chapter forever. Comment where you're listening from. Subscribe to channel. Let me tell you who Grace Morgan really was. 8 years old, 73 days away from her 9th birthday, born in a 1-bedroom apartment on the east side of Oakland, California, in a building where the heat didn't work half the year and the elevator had been broken since 2009. Raised by a single mother who worked 3 jobs, morning shift at a diner, afternoon cleaning houses in the Oakland Hills, night shift at a 24-hour gas station, just to keep a roof over their heads. Grace had never met her father, never even knew his name. Her mama, Keisha Morgan, had never talked about him. Every time Grace asked, Keisha's amber eyes would fill with tears, and she'd just shake her head and say, "Not yet, baby. When you're older. When it's safe." Grace stopped asking after a while. But here's what nobody knew. Grace Morgan had a photographic memory. Not the kind you see in movies where someone glances at a page and remembers every word. The real kind, where she could close her eyes and see entire conversations, remember every detail of a room she'd only been in once, recall the exact sequence of events from years ago like she was watching a movie in her head. Her teachers at Hoover Elementary thought she was smart. They didn't know she was brilliant. She'd taught herself to read at age 3 by watching Sesame Street and matching the letters on the screen to the words in the books her mama brought home from the library. By age 5, she was reading at a 7th grade level. By age 7, she was doing her mama's taxes because she'd figured out the math just by watching YouTube videos. But Grace learned early to hide her intelligence. Smart black girls in Oakland made people uncomfortable, made teachers ask questions about how she could possibly know these things, made other kids call her names, made the system suspicious. So Grace played dumb in class, got solid B's instead of the straight A's she could have gotten with her eyes closed, kept her head down, stayed quiet. She'd learned that skill from her mama, who'd taught her the most important lesson a black girl could learn in America: how to survive in a world that wasn't built for you. But on April 3rd, 2024, everything Grace thought she knew about survival would be tested in ways an 8-year-old should never have to face. Because that was the night her mama came home with fear in her eyes and packed Grace's backpack with 3 days' worth of clothes. "Baby," Keisha had said, her hands shaking as she zipped up the bag, "I need you to go stay with Mrs. Rodriguez downstairs, just for a little while." "Mama, what's wrong?" "Nothing, baby. Mama just has to take care of something. I'll be back in a few hours." But Keisha's eyes told a different story. They were the eyes of a woman who knew she might not be coming back at all. Grace had watched her mama walk out the door that night, and something in her 8-year-old chest told her she should memorize everything. The way her mama's hair caught the hallway light, the smell of cocoa butter on her skin, the sound of her footsteps going down the stairs. 3 weeks later, Grace was still at Mrs. Rodriguez's apartment. Her mama never came back. What happened next would destroy everything Grace thought she understood about her family. Mrs. Rodriguez was kind, but she was 78 years old and living on Social Security. She couldn't afford to feed an extra mouth for more than a few weeks. She'd already told Grace that if nobody came to claim her by the end of the month, she'd have to call Child Protective Services. Grace knew what that meant: foster care, the system. She'd heard the stories from kids at school, families that didn't want you, houses where you were just a monthly check, the constant moving from place to place, never belonging anywhere. Grace couldn't let that happen. So she'd started searching her mama's things, looking for clues about where Keisha might have gone, looking for family members she might not know about, looking for anyone who might help. That's when she found it. Hidden in the false bottom of her mama's jewelry box, a box that held 3 costume necklaces and a pair of broken earrings, Grace found a small envelope. Inside was a photograph of a man. White paper, starting to yellow at the edges, like it had been handled 1,000 times. A black man in his 20s, sitting on a motorcycle, his expression serious but his eyes soft. On the back, written in her mama's handwriting, "Ghost. If anything happens to me, find him." And below that, an address: Hell's Angels Oakland Chapter, 1234, Foothill Boulevard. Grace had stared at that photograph for a long time, memorizing every detail with her photographic memory: the way the man's hands gripped the handlebars, the leather vest with the death's head patch on the back, the scar running down his face, starting near his left eye, the small scar on his chin, in the exact same spot where Grace had a scar from when she'd fallen off the monkey bars at the park when she was 5. Grace had stood in front of Mrs. Rodriguez's bathroom mirror for 20 minutes, comparing her face to the face in the photograph. Same eyes, same cheekbones, same scar. This man wasn't just someone her mama knew. This man was her father. This is when Grace made a choice that would cost everything. On April 24th, 2024, Grace Morgan walked out of Mrs. Rodriguez's apartment at 6 in the morning before the elderly woman woke up. She left a note on the kitchen table. "Gone to find my family. Thank you for everything. Grace." She'd looked up the address on Mrs. Rodriguez's computer the night before. Foothill Boulevard was 7 miles away, too far to walk for most 8-year-olds. But Grace wasn't most 8-year-olds. She'd taken 3 buses, using the emergency money her mama had hidden in her backpack. She'd memorized the route, counting stops, making sure she didn't miss her transfer. She'd kept her head down, made herself invisible, the way her mama had taught her. By 8 in the morning, she was standing in front of a chain-link fence with barbed wire on top. Behind it, a low concrete building with motorcycles parked out front. The Hells Angels Death's Head logo painted on the wall in red and white, 10 feet tall. Men in leather vests stood guard at the gate. One of them saw her and frowned. "Kid, you lost?" "I'm here to see Ghost," Grace said, her voice steady even though her heart was hammering so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. The guard laughed. "Nice try, little girl. Go on home now." "My name is Grace Morgan," she said louder this time. "My mama is Keisha Morgan, and Ghost needs to see me." Something changed in the guard's face. He turned and called over his shoulder, "Yo, preach, we got a situation out here." 5 minutes later, Grace was being escorted through the front door of the Hells Angels Oakland Clubhouse, past men who looked like they could break her in half without trying, into a room that smelled like leather and motor oil and cigarette smoke. And then she saw the photograph on the wall. Her mama smiling like Grace had never seen her smile in real life. Happy, young, free. "Why is my mama's picture hanging in your clubhouse?" The question came out before Grace could stop it, and suddenly every eye in the room was on her. And the man rising from the chair at the head of the table, the same man from the photograph she'd found, 25 years older but unmistakable, was staring at her like he'd seen a ghost. No, not a ghost. Like he was seeing the daughter he never knew existed. Oh, Marcus Ghost Dawson hadn't cried in 37 years, not since the day his mother died when he was 15. Not when he went to prison at 22. Not when he became president of the Hells Angels Oakland chapter at 32. Not when he thought Keisha was dead. But standing there, looking into the eyes of an 8-year-old girl who had his face, his scar, his blood running through her veins, Ghost felt tears rising for the first time in nearly 4 decades. "What's your name?" His voice came out rough, barely above a whisper. "Grace. Grace Morgan." "Where's your mama, Grace?" The little girl's chin trembled, but she didn't cry. "She's been missing for 3 weeks. She told me if anything happened to her, I should find you. Are you Ghost?" Ghost nodded slowly, unable to speak. Preach stepped forward, his voice gentle in a way that contradicted his massive frame. "Sweetheart, how did you get here?" "I took 3 buses. The 51, then the 40, then the 12. Grace recited the route like she was reading from a map. "Mama left me with our neighbor, but Mrs. Rodriguez is old, and she can't keep me much longer. She said if nobody comes to get me by Friday, I have to go to foster care." Ghost's hands clenched into fists. Foster care, his daughter, over his dead body. "You hungry, little bit?" Preach asked. Grace nodded. "Tiny," Preach called out to the club's cook. "Get this girl some breakfast, everything we got." As Grace was led to a table, Ghost pulled Preach aside, his voice low and dangerous. "Get everyone else out, now." Preach nodded and started clearing the clubhouse. Within 2 minutes, it was just Ghost, Preach, and Grace, sitting at a table with a plate of scrambled eggs and bacon that the little girl attacked like she hadn't eaten in days. She probably hadn't. Not properly. Ghost sat down across from her, studying every detail of her face while she ate. The resemblance was unmistakable. This wasn't a con. This wasn't someone trying to play him. This was his daughter. "Grace," Ghost said quietly, "your mama ever talk about me?" Grace looked up from her plate, those dark eyes, his eyes, meeting his without flinching. Every night before bed, Mama told me stories, but there was one story she told over and over, about a man who lived in a fortress with his brothers. The fortress was strong and dangerous, but the man inside was lonely. He had respect, he had power, but he didn't have anyone to love. Ghost's throat tightened. Mama said if I ever met you, I shouldn't be afraid. She said you looked scary, but you weren't bad. You just needed someone to love you. Grace paused. She said you were my daddy. The word hit Ghost like a sledgehammer to the chest. Daddy. 8 years. Keisha had been pregnant for 9 months, raised this child for 8 years, and never told him. Why? Did she say why she never brought you to meet me? Ghost asked, his voice breaking. Grace nodded. She said it wasn't safe. She said you had enemies who would hurt us to hurt you. She said she had to protect me until everything was safe. The little girl's eyes filled with tears. But then she disappeared. And now I don't know if she's safe or if she's... Don't! Ghost cut her off. Don't say it. Your mama is strong. If she's been gone for 3 weeks and you're still here, it means she's protecting you. She's still fighting. But here's what Ghost didn't tell Grace. What he couldn't tell her yet. Keisha Morgan had been Ghost's entire world once upon a time. 9 years ago, when he was 43 and she was 25, he'd walked into a bookstore in downtown Oakland, the kind of place Ghost never went to, looking for a book on motorcycle mechanics. The woman behind the counter had looked up when the bell over the door chimed, and Ghost had forgotten how to breathe. She was beautiful. Yes, caramel skin, amber eyes, natural hair in a high puff, wearing a yellow sundress that made her look like sunshine in human form. But it wasn't just her beauty that stopped him cold. It was the way she looked at him. No fear, no judgment, no recognition of the Hell's Angels patch on his vest, or the scar on his face, or the reputation that preceded him everywhere he went in Oakland. She just smiled and said, "Hi there. Can I help you find something?" For the first time in his adult life, Ghost felt like a normal man. Not a criminal, not a biker, not someone to be feared. Just Marcus. Just a man who wanted to talk to a beautiful woman in a bookstore. "I'm looking for a book on motorcycles," he'd said. "Oh, you ride?" She'd grinned. "I've always wanted to learn. It looks so free, you know? Just you and the road." They'd talked for 2 hours. Ghost bought 3 books he didn't need just to have an excuse to come back. He returned the next day, and the next, and the next, and within a month, they were inseparable. Keisha didn't care that he was a Hell's Angel, didn't care about his criminal record or his reputation or the dangerous life he led. She saw Marcus, the man underneath all of that. The man who'd grown up in poverty in West Oakland, raised by a single mother who worked herself to death. The man who joined the Hell's Angels at 17 because they were the only family he had left. "I don't love the biker," Keisha had told him one night, lying in his arms in the small apartment he kept separate from the clubhouse. "I love Marcus. Whether those two are the same person is up to you." Ghost had cried that night for the first time since his mother's funeral. For 2 years, they were happy. Ghost kept Keisha's existence a secret from everyone except Preach, because he knew what happened to people he loved. His enemies would use them against him. The other biker gangs, the Mexican cartels, the white supremacist crews that hated the fact that a black man ran the most powerful Hell's Angels chapter in Northern California. If they found out about Keisha, she'd become a target. So Ghost kept her hidden, bought her a house in Alameda, away from Oakland, away from the violence, kept their relationship quiet, until the day Keisha told him she was pregnant. This is when Ghost made the biggest mistake of his life. He'd panicked, told Keisha she had to leave Oakland, leave California entirely, go somewhere safe where his enemies couldn't find her or the baby. I can't be a father, he'd said, the words coming out harsh and cruel because he was terrified. Not with the life I lead. Our child would be a target from the day it's born. Keisha had looked at him with those amber eyes full of tears. So what are you saying? You want me to get rid of it? No, God, no. I'm saying you need to disappear. Take the baby somewhere safe. I'll send you money every month. I'll make sure you're taken care of. But you can't be here. You can't be connected to me. You're choosing the club over us. I'm choosing your safety over my happiness. Keisha had left that night. Ghost gave her $50,000 in cash, set up a bank account in a fake name, and watched the only woman he'd ever loved walk out of his life to protect the child they'd created together. He thought he was doing the right thing. He thought he was keeping them safe. He had no idea he'd just made the worst decision of his life. What Ghost didn't know, what Keisha never told him, was that she never left California. She couldn't. Her mother was sick, dying of cancer in a nursing home in Oakland. Keisha couldn't leave her, so she stayed, used the money Ghost gave her to rent that apartment on the east side, raised Grace alone while visiting her dying mother every week. And she was careful. So careful. Changed her routine constantly, never went to the same places twice, kept Grace out of sight as much as possible. For 8 years, it worked. Until 3 weeks ago, when Ghost's worst nightmare came true. The truth that was about to destroy everything. While Grace finished her breakfast, Ghost pulled Preach into the back office and shut the door. It's her daughter, Ghost said, his voice hollow. Preach, that's my daughter. I can see that, brother. She's got your whole face. Preach leaned against the desk, his expression grim. Question is, where's Keisha? Missing for 3 weeks. Grace said she left her with a neighbor and never came back. Preach's jaw tightened. Victor. Ghost felt rage explode in his chest at the name. Victor Hammer Thornton, president of the Mongols MC Northern California chapter. Ghost's enemy for the past 20 years, ever since Ghost took over the Hells Angels Oakland and started pushing back against Mongol territory in the East Bay. They'd been at war for 2 decades. Murders, beatings, drive-by shootings. The body count was in the double digits on both sides. And 2 months ago, Ghost had killed Hammer's nephew in a shootout at a bar in Richmond. Hammer had sworn revenge. He found her, Ghost said, the words tasting like poison. He found Keisha, and he took her to get back at me. We don't know that for sure. I know it! Ghost slammed his fist against the wall. Why else would Keisha disappear? Why else would she send Grace here? She knew she was being hunted. She knew Hammer was coming for her. Preach pulled out his phone. I'll send the boys to her apartment. See what we can find. 30 minutes later, Ghost's phone buzzed with photos from his crew. Keisha's apartment had been ransacked, furniture overturned, drawers dumped on the floor, holes punched in the walls like someone had been searching for something. And blood. Not much, but enough. A smear on the doorframe. Drops on the carpet near the window. Someone had been hurt. Someone had fought back. Ghost looked at the photos and felt something crack inside his chest. Keisha was alive when they took her. She'd fought. But how long had she been able to hold out? 3 weeks was a long time to be in Hammer's hands. His phone buzzed again. This time, an unknown number. Ghost answered, his voice ice cold. Yeah. Ghost. Hammer's voice came through, rough with cigarettes and cruelty. Heard you got a little visitor today. Ghost's blood turned to ice. How the hell do you know that? Hammer laughed. You really think you're the only one with eyes in Oakland? I know everything that happens in this city, including that cute little black girl who walked into your clubhouse this morning. You touch her. Relax. I don't want the kid. I want you. Hammer's voice turned serious. Here's the deal. Tonight, midnight, the Port of Oakland, Pier 30. You come alone? Bring the girl. I'll trade you for her mama. I'm not bringing my daughter anywhere near you. Then her mama dies. Your choice, Ghost. The woman you love or the kid you just met. Hammer paused. You got 12 hours to decide. The line went dead. Ghost stood there, phone in his hand, rage and terror warring in his chest. Preach was already moving. I'll get the crew together. We'll hit him from 3 sides. No. Ghost's voice was final. This is a trap. Hammer wants all 3 of us. If I show up with the club, he'll kill Keisha before we get close. So what's the plan? Ghost looked at the closed office door, thinking about the 8-year-old girl sitting on the other side. The daughter he'd never known about. The daughter who'd walked 7 miles alone to find him. The daughter who'd just handed him the answer. This is when everything changed. Grace had given Ghost something when she'd arrived. He'd been so shocked by her appearance that he hadn't paid attention to it at first. But now, pulling it from his vest pocket, Ghost stared down at a small spiral notebook with a worn cover. She said her mama left this for her, Preach said. Told her to give it to you. Ghost opened it. His hands started shaking. This wasn't just a notebook. This was an intelligence file. Page after page of detailed information about the Mongols' MC operation. Names, addresses, photographs, schedules down to the minute, maps with guard positions marked, security camera blind spots highlighted. Keisha had been watching them, for months, maybe years, gathering information like a trained operative. On the first page, in Keisha's handwriting, Marcus, if you're reading this, something has happened to me. I've been watching Hammer's crew for 6 months since I saw one of them following me near Grace's school. I knew they were getting close. I documented everything I could. Use this to save me. Use this to protect our daughter. I never stopped loving you. I never stopped hoping we could be a family. K. Ghost felt tears sliding down his face for the 2nd time that day. Keisha had known she was being hunted. She'd prepared for this. She'd turned herself into an intelligence gatherer, watching the enemy so that even if they took her, Ghost would have the tools to save her. And Grace. 8 years old, carrying this notebook across Oakland because her mama trusted her to complete the mission. Call everyone, Ghost said, his voice steady now. Every chapter within 100 miles. I want every Hell's Angel we can get here by tonight. What's the plan? Ghost looked down at the notebook, at the map showing Hammer's compound in East Oakland, at the detailed guard rotations. At the escape tunnel Keisha had somehow discovered running from the warehouse to the industrial pier. Hammer wants me at Pier 30 at midnight. He thinks I'm coming to negotiate. And? Ghost's smile was cold and dangerous. I'm going to stall him while you take a team through this tunnel and pull Keisha out of that warehouse. Then we burn the whole damn thing to the ground. Preach grinned. Now that's the Ghost I know, but there was still one problem. Grace. What Ghost decided next would determine whether he was a good father or a monster. Ghost walked back into the main room where Grace sat at the table, coloring on a napkin with a pen someone had given her. He sat down across from her, and she looked up with those eyes, his eyes, and waited. Grace, I need you to be honest with me. How much do you remember from your mama's notebook? All of it. Ghost blinked. All of it? Grace nodded. I have photographic memory. I remember everything I see. I read Mama's notebook 43 times. I can draw you any of the maps from memory. I can tell you the guard schedules. I know where the tunnel is. Preach whistled low. She's your daughter, all right. Ghost leaned forward. Baby girl, I need you to understand something. Your mama is in danger. Bad men have her. I'm going to get her back, but it's going to be dangerous. I need you to stay here where it's safe. No. Grace's voice was small but firm. No? Uncle Preach needs the maps, the tunnel. I'm the only one who knows the details from memory. If I stay here, people might miss things. People might get hurt. Grace looked at him with an intensity that made Ghost's chest ache. Mama said you would protect me, but I can help protect her too. You're 8 years old. I'm not stupid. I didn't say you were. Then don't treat me like I am. Grace stood up, and despite being less than 4 feet tall, she somehow commanded the room. I walked across Oakland alone to find you. I carried Mama's intelligence notebook like she told me to. I can guide Uncle Preach through that tunnel. I can help save my mama. Ghost looked at Preach, who shrugged. She's not wrong. We could use someone who knows that notebook inside and out. She's a child. She's your child, and she's got your stubbornness. Preach crouched down to Grace's level. Listen, little bit. If you come with us, you stay right next to me the whole time. You do exactly what I say, and if I tell you to run, you run. Deal? Grace nodded solemnly. Deal. Ghost wanted to argue. Wanted to lock his daughter in the safest room in the clubhouse and never let her near danger. But when he looked into her eyes, he saw himself at 8 years old. Growing up in West Oakland with a single mother who worked 3 jobs. Learning early that survival meant being tough, being smart, and not waiting for anyone to save you. Grace had already survived 3 weeks of not knowing if her mother was alive or dead. She'd already made the journey to find him alone. Maybe the way to protect her wasn't to hide her away. Maybe it was to teach her to fight. Okay, Ghost said, but you wear body armor, and you stay with Preach every second. I will. Ghost pulled his daughter into his arms for the first time, and she wrapped her small arms around his neck and held on tight. I'm going to get your mama back, he whispered into her hair. I promise you, baby girl, I'm going to bring her home. By 11 p.m., the Hells Angels Oakland Clubhouse was packed with bikers from chapters across Northern California, Sacramento, San Jose, Stockton, Modesto. 60 men in total, all wearing the Death's Head patch, all armed, all ready to go to war. Ghost stood at the head of the table with the map Keisha had drawn spread out in front of him. This is how we do it, he said, his voice carrying across the room. 3 teams. Team 1. That's me and 5 brothers. Goes to Pier 30 at midnight. Hammer expects me to show up for a negotiation. I stall him. Keep him talking. Make him think I'm actually considering his offer. What's his offer? Someone called out. He wants me to surrender the Oakland chapter. Hand over all our territory in exchange for Keisha. Ghost's voice hardened. He's lying, of course. The minute I give him what he wants, he'll kill all 3 of us. But I'm going to make him believe I'm desperate enough to consider it. He pointed to the map. Team 2, that's Preach, 20 brothers, and Grace, goes through this tunnel here. He tapped the marked location. According to the intelligence, it leads into the basement of Hammer's warehouse in East Oakland. That's where they're holding Keisha. How do we know she's there? Preach asked. Because Keisha wrote in her notebook that this warehouse is where Hammer keeps people he wants to interrogate. It's isolated, no neighbors, easy to control. Ghost's jaw tightened. He's had her for 3 weeks. She'll be there. And Team 3? Ghost looked at Tiny, the club's sergeant-at-arms. You take the rest of the brothers and surround the warehouse from the outside. 3 entry points, north, east, south. Once Preach signals that he has Keisha, all 3 teams hit at the same time. Preach from the inside, you from the outside, and I cut loose from the pier and bring my team from the west. We're outnumbered, someone pointed out. Hammer has at least 100 soldiers. He's got numbers. We've got intelligence. Ghost held up Keisha's notebook. We know every camera location, every blind spot, every guard rotation down to the minute. Hammer thinks he's got home advantage. What he doesn't know is that we've got the complete blueprints to his fortress. Preach grinned. It's gonna be a massacre. For them, Ghost agreed. Questions? Silence. One more thing. Ghost's voice dropped, dangerous and cold. Hammer dies tonight. I don't care who gets him. I don't care how it happens. But Victor Thornton does not walk away from this. Understood? Every man in the room nodded. Then let's ride. The war for Oakland was about to begin. At 11:45 p.m., Grace Morgan sat in the back of a black van driven by Preach, wearing a bulletproof vest that was so big it almost swallowed her whole. Around her were 20 Hell's Angels, all armed to the teeth with handguns, shotguns, and enough ammunition to start a small war. Grace wasn't scared. She probably should have been. An 8-year-old girl surrounded by bikers heading into a gunfight to rescue her mother. But all she felt was determination. Her mama had spent 3 weeks in Hammer's hands. 3 weeks of torture, probably. 3 weeks of not knowing if her daughter was safe. Grace was going to end that tonight. You remember the plan, little bit? Preach asked from the driver's seat. Grace nodded. We enter through the tunnel at 11:50 during the guard shift change. The tunnel comes out in the basement storage room. From there, it's 15 steps to the hallway, then a right turn to the holding cells. Mama will be in cell 3, according to her notes. And if something goes wrong, I run back to the tunnel and wait for you there. Good girl. Preach pulled the van to a stop in an abandoned lot next to the industrial waterfront. This is it. The tunnel entrance was hidden behind a rusted dumpster. Keisha's notebook had even included instructions on how to open the hidden door. 3 knocks, pause, 2 knocks. Grace watched as one of the Hell's Angels followed the pattern. The door swung open silently, revealing a dark passage leading underground. Stay close, Preach said, clicking on a flashlight. They moved in single file through the tunnel, Grace sandwiched in the middle of the group, her heart pounding but her mind clear. She'd memorized every detail of her mama's notebook. She knew exactly where they were going. The tunnel was damp and smelled like mold, the walls rough concrete that scraped against their jackets as they moved. Water dripped from the ceiling. Somewhere in the distance, they could hear the sound of machinery. After what felt like an hour, but was probably only 5 minutes, they reached a metal door. Preach held up his fist, signaling everyone to stop. He pressed his ear against the door, listening. Silence. He slowly turned the handle and pushed. The door opened into a storage room filled with boxes and old furniture, exactly like Keisha's map had shown. Empty. Preach signaled for 2 men to scout ahead. They moved like ghosts, checking the hallway beyond. One of them came back and gave a thumbs up. Clear. Grace followed Preach out of the tunnel and into the warehouse basement. According to her mama's notes, they had exactly 90 seconds before the next guard patrol came through. They moved quickly down the hallway, Grace counting in her head. 15 steps. Right turn. There. 3 cells with metal doors, small windows with bars. Preach looked through the window of cell 3, and his face changed. He'd found her. This is when Grace saw her mother for the first time in 3 weeks. Keisha Morgan was barely recognizable. The woman Grace knew, strong, beautiful, always smiling, had been replaced by someone who looked like they'd been through hell. Her face was bruised, both eyes swollen, lips split and bleeding. Her natural hair was matted with dried blood. Her clothes were torn and filthy. Her hands were chained to the wall. But when Preach jimmied the lock and the door swung open, Keisha's eyes, those amber eyes that Grace had inherited, lit up with a fierce joy that made Grace's heart break and heal at the same time. "Mama!" Grace started forward, but Preach caught her. Wait, let me check for traps. But Keisha's voice came out, rough and damaged, but still her mama's voice. Grace? Baby, is that you? I'm here, Mama. I found Daddy. He's getting you out. Keisha started crying, tears cutting clean lines through the dirt on her face. My baby girl. My brave, beautiful baby girl. Preach cut through the chains with bolt cutters and caught Keisha as she collapsed forward. We need to move, now. Can you walk? One of the bikers asked Keisha. I can run if I have to. Keisha's eyes found Grace, and she reached out with shaking hands to touch her daughter's face. How did you find him? I remembered everything you taught me, Mama. I found the notebook. I found the address. I walked to the clubhouse and asked for Ghost. You walked. Keisha's voice broke. Baby, you walked across Oakland alone? You taught me to be brave. Keisha pulled Grace into her arms despite her injuries, holding her daughter like she might disappear. I love you so much. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I left you. We gotta go, Preach interrupted. Reunion later. Extraction now. They made it halfway back to the tunnel before the alarm went off. Honest, somewhere in the warehouse, someone had discovered the open cell. Lights flooded the basement. Sirens wailed. Run! Preach shouted. They sprinted for the tunnel entrance, Grace's small legs pumping as hard as they could, Keisha stumbling but keeping pace, supported by 2 bikers on either side. Behind them, they could hear shouts, footsteps pounding, gunfire exploded, bullets ricocheting off concrete walls. The Hells Angels returned fire, creating covering fire as the group raced for the tunnel. Grace dove through the door first, Preach right behind her, dragging Keisha. Go, go, go! Preach yelled. They ran through the tunnel, the sounds of fighting echoing behind them. More Hells Angels were holding the entrance, buying them time. Grace's lungs burned, her legs screamed. But she didn't stop, because her mama was right behind her, alive, running, fighting to survive. They burst out of the tunnel entrance into the night air, and Preach immediately pulled out his phone and sent a single text. Package secured. 3 miles away, at Pier 30, Ghost's phone buzzed. He looked down at the message, then up at Hammer, who stood 20 feet away with 50 armed Mongols surrounding him. Sorry, Hammer, Ghost said, his voice cold and final. Negotiations over. And he opened fire. The final battle for Oakland had begun. The next 10 minutes were chaos. At the warehouse, Tiny and his team crashed through the doors from 3 sides, catching the Mongols in a crossfire. Inside, Preach's team fought their way back up from the basement, turning the warehouse into a war zone. At the pier, Ghost and his team engaged Hammer's soldiers in a firefight that lit up the Oakland waterfront like the 4th of July. Grace huddled in the van with her mama, Keisha holding her daughter tight, both of them pressing their hands over their ears to block out the sound of gunfire and explosions. I'm sorry, Keisha kept whispering. I'm so sorry I left you. I'm so sorry I didn't tell him about you sooner. I thought I was protecting you. You did protect me, Mama. Grace looked up at her mother with those dark eyes, Ghost's eyes. You gave me the notebook. You taught me to be brave. You sent me to Daddy. You protected me even when you couldn't be there. Keisha pressed her forehead against Grace's. You're so strong, baby. Stronger than I ever was. I got it from you. The gunfire started to slow, then stopped. Preach appeared at the van door, his face streaked with blood that wasn't his. We got them. Warehouse is clear. Hammer's men are either dead or running. And Ghost? Keisha's voice shook. On his way. Hammer's dead. It's over. 5 minutes later, a motorcycle roared into the lot. Ghost climbed off his bike, his leather vest torn, his face bloody from a graze wound across his cheek, but alive. He walked to the van, his eyes finding Keisha's. For 8 years, they'd been apart. 8 years of Ghost thinking she wanted nothing to do with him. 8 years of Keisha raising their daughter alone, afraid to bring her into Ghost's dangerous world. 8 years of stolen time. But when Ghost reached out and took Keisha's hand, pulling her into his arms, those 8 years seemed to evaporate. "I thought you were dead," Ghost said, his voice breaking. "For 487 days I thought I'd lost you." "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. I should have told you about Grace. I should have trusted you. You were protecting our daughter. You did what you thought was right." Ghost looked down at Grace, who stood beside her mother, watching this reunion with those knowing eyes. "And she's perfect. You raised her perfect." Grace stepped forward and took both of their hands. "Are we a family now?" Ghost dropped to his knees in front of his daughter. "Yeah, baby girl, we're a family. Forever." Keisha joined him, the three of them kneeling in a parking lot in East Oakland at 1 a.m, surrounded by Hell's Angels and the aftermath of war, but for the first time in 8 years, whole. This is when the Morgan Dawson family was born. 6 months later. The Hell's Angels. Oakland Clubhouse didn't look different from the outside. Still the same chain-link fence, still the same barbed wire, still the same Death's Head logo painted on the wall. But inside, everything had changed. Grace's artwork covered one wall. Drawings of motorcycles and flowers and her family, all three of them together. Keisha's photograph still hung above the bar, but now there were others beside it. A wedding photo from 3 months ago, Ghost and Keisha married in the clubhouse with Grace standing between them. A family portrait from Grace's 9th birthday. Pictures of Grace learning to ride a motorcycle in the parking lot, Ghost holding the back of the seat while she pedaled. The clubhouse wasn't just a fortress anymore. It was a home. Grace went to a new school now, one where Ghost could pick her up every day on his motorcycle. She still hid her intelligence most of the time, still got solid B's instead of straight A's. But at home, Ghost and Keisha encouraged her to be as smart as she wanted to be. Built her a bookshelf in their room at the clubhouse. Let her read anything she wanted. Answered every question she asked, no matter how complex. "She's going to be something special," Preach had said one night, watching Grace explain quantum physics to a group of fascinated bikers who definitely didn't understand a word she was saying. "She already is," Ghost had replied. Keisha had opened a bookstore again, this time in a small shop attached to the clubhouse. The Hells Angels protected it. Nobody bothered her. Nobody threatened her family. And Ghost was still the president of the Hells Angels Oakland chapter. Still dangerous, still respected, still feared. But when he walked through the clubhouse doors at the end of the day, he was just Marcus, just a husband and father, just a man who'd been given a second chance at the family he thought he'd lost. One evening, as the three of them sat together at the long table where the club held meetings, Grace looked up from her homework and asked, "Daddy, what if I hadn't come to find you that day?" Ghost set down his beer and pulled his daughter onto his lap. "What do you mean, baby girl? What if I'd been too scared? What if I'd stayed with Mrs. Rodriguez and gone to foster care? What would have happened?" Ghost looked at Keisha, and they shared a long look of understanding. "I don't know," Ghost admitted. "Maybe I'd still be sitting in this clubhouse, staring at your mama's picture, thinking everything was gone. I'd never know you existed. I'd never have this family." "So I saved us?" Grace asked. Keisha pulled her daughter close. "Yes, baby, you saved all of us. You're braver than anyone I've ever known." "Braver than you?" Grace looked skeptical. "Way braver than me. I was afraid for 8 years, afraid to tell your daddy about you, Afraid to bring you into this world. Keisha's voice got thick with emotion. But you weren't afraid. When everything went wrong, when I disappeared and you were alone, you didn't let fear stop you. You taught me that, Mama. You said love is stronger than fear. Ghost felt his chest tighten. Your mama's right, little bit. You taught us all something important. What's that? That sometimes the scariest thing isn't facing danger. It's being too afraid to face it. Ghost looked at his daughter, at his wife, at the family that had almost slipped through his fingers. If you'd let fear win, we wouldn't be here. But you chose courage, you chose love, and that changed everything. Grace smiled, that confident smile that reminded Ghost of himself. So what happens now? Now, Ghost grinned. Now we live, we protect each other, we build something good out of all this pain, and we never, ever let fear win again. Keisha raised her glass of water. To family. To courage, Grace added. To second chances. Ghost finished. They clinked their glasses together, and for the first time in any of their lives, they all felt complete. Because sometimes, the bravest thing a child can do is ask one simple question. Why is my mama's picture in your house? And sometimes, that one question is enough to bring a whole family home. So let me ask you something. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to choose between fear and love? Between staying safe and doing what's right? Have you ever had to be brave when every part of you wanted to run? Have you ever felt like the system was designed to keep you apart from the people you love? Grace was 8 years old. 8. And she crossed Oakland alone to find a father she'd never met because she knew her mama needed saving. How many of us have that kind of courage? How many of us let fear win when love is on the line? This story isn't just about a biker and his family. It's about all of us. About the systems that try to keep us down. About the institutions that profit from our pain. About the people in power who think they can control our lives. But here's what they don't understand. They can take our homes. They can take our money. They can take our freedom. But they can't take our love. They can't take our courage. And they can't stop us from fighting for the people who matter. Ghost thought he'd lost everything when Keisha disappeared. He thought the best he could do was survive, day by day, in a world that had stolen his family. But Grace proved him wrong. One little black girl with her daddy's eyes and her mama's courage showed an entire biker gang that sometimes the smallest person in the room has the most power. Not because of money, not because of violence, not because of fear, because of love. Drop your story in the comments. Tell us about a time you chose courage over fear. Tell us about the family that found you when you needed them most. Tell us about the moment you realized you were stronger than you knew. Share this story, not the sanitized version. Not the version where everything is neat and clean and nobody gets hurt. The real version. The version where an 8-year-old black girl walks into a Hells Angels clubhouse and asks the question that changes everything. Because that's the version we need. That's the version that reminds us we're not alone. That's the version that shows us we can survive anything when we fight for the people we love. Subscribe to channel. Because your story matters. Because your courage matters. Because your love matters. And because 8-year-old Grace Morgan proved that sometimes the smallest voice in the room is the one that needs to be heard the loudest. Stay just, stay loud, stay free.